welcome to another fun episode of Thrive Live. Today we are going to talk about how alcohol affects us specifically as women. And I mean, who doesn't like a nice glass of Pinot? So let's understand what actually is it doing to our body. What are the pros? What are the cons? And this is just going to kind of crack into the discussion. Of course, there is way more depth here that we could go into, but we're going to try and at least kind of hit some of the highlights. So let's first talk about heavy drinking. So heavy drinking in women increased by 41% with COVID. So basically they were comparing 2019 numbers to 2020. And for women, we upped our intake by 41%. It's pretty significant. And we've also seen that having kids in the home is associated with more drinking. That's basically what happened with COVID. And increased alcohol intake is associated with psychological stress. And definitely we see in the research more so with women than specifically with men. And of course, this is a bigger nut to crack open in terms of we got genetics, we've got, the stress piece, how we're retrained in our childhood and shown how to respond to stress. And we know that alcohol is way more than just like a chemical addiction. It's a coping thing. It's a whole lifestyle aspect. So again, we can go way deeper into any of these points that I'm going to be bringing up today, but hopefully it'll at least kind of give you more of that high altitude understanding and flyover of alcohol. So what is determined as a light drinker? So a light drinker is consuming less than 3 drinks a week. A moderate drinker is going to be less than 1 drink a day for women and less than 2 drinks a day for men. Heavy drinker is going to be 8 drinks or more in a week for a female, or 15 or more drinks for a man. And when we talk about a drink, what size are we talking about? We're talking about 14 grams of alcohol, which is about equivalent to 1 12-ounce beer, 1 5 ounces of wine, or 1.5 ounces of an 80 proof liquor. So that 1 drink is, when we say 1 drink, where it's actually pretty equivalent to 1 drink, although I know most people don't drink just 5 ounces of wine, or they don't have just 1.5 ounces of liquor. But if you're drinking a 12-ounce beer, that's basically counting as your 1 drink. So women and men, so when we look at blood alcohol content, women reach higher blood alcohol contents faster than men. And this is even after we take into consideration weight adjustments. We think it has to do with the body composition and how much water is in the body. So there is definitely a difference in just at least the blood alcohol content levels. Now, what about physiology of men versus female? Superwoman. So as ladies, we are more susceptible to organ damage from alcohol in comparison to men. We will develop liver disease sooner than men, even after less alcohol has been consumed, and possibly more susceptible to alcohol-related cognitive performance. So brain fog, you can't perform the task, delayed memory, attention function issues. So, but there is also some good to the alcohol, right? It's a double-sided sword here. So why would we want to celebrate the good news? So there are some health benefits that we have seen associated with alcohol consumption. We do see that there is a reduced risk for stroke. We do see there is a reduced risk for kidney, thyroid, lung, and blood cancers, reduced risk for heart attack and death, and cardiovascular disease. And we do see more successful aging with the alcohol. Now, a lot of this is going to go into how you process it, what type of alcohol, how much are you drinking? But let's first talk about the stroke. So 1 in 5 women will have a stroke in their lifetime. And we have seen that light alcohol consumption, so less than 7 drinks in a week, was associated with a decreased stroke risk for women by 30% versus ladies who don't drink at all, so abstainers. So this research is showing that some alcohol will actually lower that stroke risk. That's probably more so because of the blood thinning, blood thinning capacity of alcohol. Now, of course, heavy consumption was associated with the doubled risk of having a stroke for women specifically. Let's talk about heart disease, coronary heart disease. So women who are drinking a low load of 1 drink a day versus abstainers actually had a 23% lower incidence of heart disease. So that's about 1/3 had a lower incidence of sudden cardiac death in women consuming a low dose of alcohol versus abstainers. And again, none of this research should be used to promote drinking alcohol or to start drinking alcohol if you've never been drinking alcohol. I'll get to that research later in a bit. But I wanted to bring this conversation up of what are the health benefits to alcohol, because I get that a lot too of, okay, well, I've heard a glass of red wine is good for you at night. I've heard that alcohol can reduce your stroke rate or your cardiovascular disease rate. We definitely have data on that, and it's for a specific level of that light drinking category. I'm just scrolling through my notes here. Okay. So it's really the amount and frequency of alcohol that is consumed matters more than the type of alcohol chosen. So wine, beer, spirits, etc. So really it comes down to the amount and how often. So 1 drink a day, at least 4 times a week is associated with that lower heart attack rates, lower death rates because of the antithrombotic, meaning that blood thinning action of the alcohol. And then we know in that moderate intake of the alcohol, we still get that decreased in the heart attack risk, but we actually get an increase, and we get an increase of your good cholesterol and a lowering of the fibrinogen, which is a marker that we use for tracking inflammation and cardiovascular risk. But of course, too much of a good thing is not good, because it can also, when you get into that higher levels, is going to drive other issues for sure. Let's talk about cancer risk. So I want you to know, walking away, that any amount of alcohol, any amount, increases breast cancer risk. It lowers the cancer risk for other cancers, right? It lowers the cancer risk for kidney cancer, thyroid cancer, blood cancer, but any drop of alcohol actually increases the risk for breast cancer. And the risk, your proportional risk of breast cancer, increases based on the proportional amount of alcohol consumed. Because what's happening is you're breaking down the alcohol into cancer promoting chemicals is very specific for the breast tissue, and it proportionally increases the more that you drink. Now let's talk about early drinking. When we talk about early drinking, we are specifically talking about if you start to drink alcohol anywhere between 14 years old and 40. So majority of patients are not starting to drink alcohol after 40 years old. We have already had the alcohol consumption. So if you started drinking alcohol before 40 years old, you are technically classified as an early drinker. And this makes a difference when it comes to breast cancer risk significantly. So we know that if you're an early drinker, it increases our breast cancer risk at a pretty significant amount. And even if you stop drinking after 40, your increased breast cancer risk is still elevated because you were drinking in your early years, 18 to 40 years old. And some of what's happening with the alcohol and the breast cancers has to do also how we're mobilizing the estrogen. So alcohol increases an enzyme called aromatase. Aromatase converts our testosterone to estrogen. So it upregulates this enzyme. So when we drink alcohol, it's not only getting the blood sugar hit, but it's also driving your hormones more into an estrogen dominant state. Sure, you can have some breast cancers that are progesterone receptor positive, but or estrogen receptor negative, but estrogen loves higher levels of estrogen will definitely increase your breast cancer risk. So alcohol by itself increases estrogen dominance. It increases the amount of estrogen that's floating around your body. So it not only upregulates that enzyme, but it also it makes your liver shut down its eliminative capabilities of the estrogen. So not only are you improving how you convert your testosterone to estrogen, but you're also shutting down how you eliminate that excess estrogen out of the body. So there's more circulating estrogen now to drive PMS, breast tenderness, fibroadenomas, breast cancer risk. Anything that is going to be estrogen driven will definitely take a hit with the alcohol. And that the degree of the hit just varies on the amount of alcohol. The more that you have the alcohol, the more the estrogen promoting pathway you're going to have. Other correlations going back to that breast cancer risk aspect, alcohol significantly decreases the vitamin E, which is a very important antioxidant. And that antioxidant is important when it comes to breast cancer risk. So as our vitamin E gets depleted, our breast cancer risk increases. There's increased levels of oxidative stress with alcohol in women. And when your cells come under too much oxidative stress, it's like they're burning out, right? They're not being able to repair. Our biochemistry can't recycle. And so this is going to be increasing our breast cancer risk because our cells are going to start to get dysfunction, and we don't have those nice antioxidants to balance it. Alcohol also weakens the benefits of tamoxifen. So if you've had breast cancer, you've been put on tamoxifen, which is a medication to basically put you into menopause and to crash all of your estrogen levels. But what we actually see is that if you're drinking and on tamoxifen, the alcohol weakens the anti-proliferative effect of tamoxifen, and it increases the amount of dense breast tissue, and it lowers your vitamin E. So alcohol-based, they kind of undo some of the effects of the tamoxifen. And even if you're not on tamoxifen, we still know that alcohol increases the breast density. And that, I think, really goes back to that estrogen-driven pathway, because the estrogen is increasing the density of the breast tissue. Now, with all of those scary stats, with alcohol and breast cancer, we don't see in the research that alcohol increases the risk of dying from breast cancer after you've had the diagnosis of breast cancer. It just basically really increases your risk of developing it. So how do we want to approach the alcohol with breast cancer, especially have a very strong family history, is you really just want to limit your alcohol consumption. So less than 3 drinks a week, eliminate caffeine. Caffeine can propagate more breast tissue density, increase your plant-based foods. So fibers, aim to get like 60% of your diet as veggies and colorful and eating the rainbow, and, make your food is medicine. Reducing your saturated fats and your red meats. And we also know that by taking all of those parameters, that actually improves the breast density. And I can tell you clinically, I've seen all those work as well, right? The diet that helps to promote hormone balance and estrogen elimination to improve PMS or PMDD or fibroadenomas or breast density is the one that is very high dense in plant fibers, very low in caffeine, very low in alcohol, and lower on red meat and saturated fats. And then there's another added benefit to fiber, another reason why we should love our veggies. And that is because the fiber in the veggies that the nice, colorful fruits and veggies, more so the veggies, but that you're eating, actually binds up toxins in the colon that drive breast cancer risk. So by having a high veggie, high fiber diet, you reduce your breast cancer risk because it's binding up the toxic things that you're then going to poop out. And we know that women who, so to kind of throw out some stats for you. So women who had a very low vegetable fiber intake had a 6% increased risk in the breast cancer category if they were having a drink a day, versus if they had a very high veggie fiber intake, who are also drinking 1 alcoholic drink a day, they did not have an increased risk of breast cancer. So the amount, like one thing that I see all the too very common with a lot of patients is that it's the amount of fiber. You can say, oh, I'm eating veggies, I'm eating the rainbow, but how much makes a really big difference when it comes to the effects of the alcohol as a female, and also to tolerating or improving our breast cancer disease risk factors to alcohol. So let's talk about, what do I want to talk about next? Let's talk about estrogen dominance. So even if you're not overly concerned about your risk for breast cancer, but you're having PMS or PMDD or fibroadenomas, alcohol increases the estrogen through that whole aromatization of it and shutting down the liver's ability to excrete it and break it down. So you get increased estrogen, and the hormones, estrogen and progesterone, we want to kind of keep them in balance as much as possible. And you can have high levels of your hormones or low, but if they're imbalanced, then that's going to drive a lot of the PMS or your menstrual symptoms or your premenopausal symptoms. And so what we actually know is that alcohol will increase estradiol. So we have estrone, which is E1, estradiol, E2, and estriol, which is E3. E1 is the most potent, E2 is the next potent, and then E3 is like the weakest estrogen. Alcohol increases the estrone, so E1 and E2, so some of your most potent estrogens floating around your body. Now, we know that in women who are postmenopausal, right? It's been a while since you've seen your period, but women who are postmenopausal, who are taking oral estrogen therapy, had increased estrogen levels. They have that estrogen dominance on the blood from the alcohol. Now, I don't recommend oral estrogen hormone replacement therapy. Anyways, you really want to be getting that transdermally or sublingually because you want to bypass your liver pathway. And if you're on oral estrogen, rethink that, please. Make that a whole nother lecture. But either way, all ages, doesn't matter if you're 18, you're in your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, your 50s, your 70s, in all women, alcohol increases your androgens. So androgens are going to be, think of more your testosterones. So even if you don't have a lot of hormones because you're postmenopausal, you're still going to have an estrogen testosterone effect. So how would we go about treating estrogen dominance? There's a lot of different ways to go about this. For those of you who work with me, you know, I'm big on kind of addressing the whole orchestra, look at the gut, look at the diet, look at our thyroid, our stress, our circadian cycle, you know, the whole shebang, the whole picture. But easily and quickly lower your alcohol, right? We already know alcohol is going to increase estrogen, so just lower it. Looking at your diet, like really crank those veggie fibers, really cranking your liver foods, your broccoli, your cruciferous veggies. They are great for your liver to help to catabolize and to get these estrogens out. As just a fun side note, for those of you who have been breastfeeding, that actually reduces your breast cancer risk because the breastfeeding process shuts down your estrogens. And so then you have, during that period of breastfeeding, your breast tissue is getting less estrogen, basically. So for the androgen elevations. So, right, the alcohol increasing the androgen elevations treatment, lower the alcohol, but green tea is amazing at helping to eliminate the estrogens and testosterones. I love it. Nettle tea is also really good for that, balancing the blood sugar, calming the stress. And there's a whole bunch of herbs that we can also bring in to help modulate these hormonal pathways. Let's talk about osteoporosis for a minute. So yes, alcohol increases the risk for osteoporosis. Why? Because alcohol interferes with the calcium and vitamin D production, and it affects the cortisol levels. So the long story short is the alcohol is going to affect the acidity in your body. So your body has to pull more calcium out of the bones to balance that acidity. And you're going to be put more into a state of breaking down your bones as opposed to building bones. So alcohol will definitely increase the risk for osteopenia and osteoporosis. Let's talk about the brain. So this is the part that definitely gets me a little bit more nervous, but I also have a big family history of Alzheimer's disease. But women are more susceptible than men to white matter loss. So our brain is made up of white matter and gray matter. So we are more likely to have destruction and shrinking of the white matter in the frontal and temporal lobes of our brain with prolonged heavy drinking. And we can also be more influenced, more addicted to alcohol in some situations easier than men. But we will definitely lose that white matter more. We will lose it quicker and easier than men. On the gray matter side, alcohol decreases all gray matter. Now, the good news about the white matter is that white matter actually recovers more quickly when women stop drinking, which is great. So we can actually recover our brains when we stop drinking. But when it gets to the memory, we start to have some bigger issues here. So we see an overall decreased capability in our memory. So the alcohol is impairing the recall and how we're coding into memory. We're seeing changes in our brain biochemistry. So basically, we see changes in how our brain gets excited and how our brain calms down. And so this is can be part of the challenge with alcohol withdrawal syndrome. And when we try and pull back is because literally the brain has to recalibrate its balance of neurotransmitters. And it tends to get more stuck into an excited pathway. So we actually get an upregulation of the NMDA receptor density and function. So the MDA receptor is kicking off and firing more. And we know that prolonged activation of this NMDA pathway triggers calcium-related brain damage, neurodegeneration, cell toxicity, neuronal death. So not saying you're going to get all that from a drink, but over prolonged time, your brain this is how that alcohol is actually more damaging to the brain. And when we see in the binge drinkers, we'll see the binge drinkers have this calcium-related brain damage. So there's a lot there on the brain that is going to be definitely more load dependent. So the more you drink, the more that calcium-related damage that you're going to get. Fortunately, we have a lot of therapy that we can use to help patients with the alcohol withdrawal aspect, and that can be its own separate lecture on that. So at the end of the day, there are some pros to alcohol, right? We can reduce our risk of stroke because alcohol is a blood thinner. We can reduce our risk for heart attack and cardiovascular disease to some extent as a light drinker. But alcohol will still, at the end of the day, increase the breast cancer risk for all women across the board. And it will affect our dementia rates. It will affect our brain-related aging. And that doesn't matter if you have a little bit or a lot. There's any alcohol is very damaging to the brain. But the good news is that we can at least recover the white matter when you stop, and we can recover the brain. The brain wants to heal. So, and even though there are benefits to having some wine, right? There's benefits to lowering that risk, and cancer risk for thyroid disease, for kidney cancers, blood cancers. We still don't advise non-drinkers to start drinking. There's always a potential to develop an alcohol use disorder, and addiction is highly addictive. And it can lead to other issues like depression, anxiety, worsening existing mental health imbalances. So don't start drinking if you're not drinking yet, but I at least hope that this gave you some really good information on kind of understanding, what does alcohol actually really do to us? What does it do to our brain? What does it do to our estrogen? What are our risk factors that go up with alcohol? And what are some risk factors that actually go down with drinking alcohol? So, all right, everyone have a wonderful week. Let me know if you have any questions or concerns that pop up, or if there are some topics that you really want me to get into, just send us an email over and I would love to talk about them. All right, everyone have a great week. Bye.